Perfect. So we're going to start the meeting of the Franklin Environmental Commission meeting at 6:31 on August 28th. I'm going to start with roll call. Vice Chair Sarah Finn.
Here.
Oh, sorry.
I'll call.
Oh, he does it. All right, sorry. Got it.
Chair Valdez.
Here.
Vice Chair Serafin.
Here.
Secretary Sharma here. Alderman Craig.
Here.
Commissioner Sohasik. Absent. Planner X. Yes. Go ahead.
Got it. The Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So we need to first open for the citizen comment period. We show that no one's present or came up. So that ends at 6:33. Right? Yeah. Go with that.
No citizens present.
Next on the agenda, approve the minutes of the meeting from June 26th.
Motion to approve.
I second. And then I know I call for a vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so vote to approve the minutes.
Aye. You can just do it
aye.
this way.
Perfect.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those not in favor? And then motion
Carries.
carries. Perfect.
I would like to suggest, since we have an applicant here for an NRSE, that we keep the agenda out of order. That's at your discretion as chair.
That's fine.
But then they can do their thing.
Yeah, that's fine by me. Do I have to motion that, or is it just gonna? All right. Yeah, let's get it done.
Give us 1 second to get this.
Sounds like a plan.
For those of you that I don't know if you've met him before, Nick Fuchs is a planner with the city of Franklin. He worked here before I did. And so Reginald and I came in after, and then he came back when we were very, very short-staffed to lend a hand, and we're grateful for his time.
So you're representing the city?
So he's a planner.
Do we need to document here or?
Yeah, if you wanted to just make a note in the attendance that I'm here and that he's here, and then usually it's appropriate to put the planner, Nick, presented.
Okay.
You don't have to put the details of the presentation unless you feel there's something that you want to.
So, I brought up the Natural Resource Protection Plan map. Shows the protected resources as well as the proposed improvements. Essentially, this is a natural resource special exception requesting disturbance of wetland buffer and wetland setback, as well as the young woodland area that is located east to the proposed drive. The goal of the project is to construct this driveway, connect it to the Salvation Army property, and then it would provide additional access for the property at the corner, which is the former KFC site. And the applicant is also proposing the other with this approval and the approval of a certified survey map to then make site and building changes. So they'd update the building facade, parking, add landscaping, lighting, those type of changes. So all in anticipation of a future tenant for that building. So really it's, there is mitigation proposed as far as providing a larger wetland buffer area, which would be protecting the conservation easement. And then also staff's recommending restoration to the wetland area or improvements. There's, I think, trash and debris and so cleanup that's needed within that area, as well as invasive species removal. So that is a part of the staff recommendation. But overall, staff is recommending approval, and the applicant's also here to answer any questions.
I mean, as far as the setback, is that going to be maintained in a way where, again, the debris and trash and all that will not start accumulating again? Because the setback is what it is, just setting back that much.
Sure. And I'm Justin Johnson on behalf of College Avenue Associates.
State your address, please, your business address.
I'll give my home address on this one because I switched companies right in between this, so I can't really be here on behalf of either one of them. N70 W5450 Bridge Road, Cedarburg, Wisconsin, 53012. Yeah, as Nick stated, part of this is to clean up. There's buckthorn in there. There's trash. There's dead ash trees. It's kind of a mess back there because it's tucked in behind some residential properties, and it just never gets any attention. So then, as part of this, there will be a CSM that gives part of this land over to the Salvation Army, and then part of it becomes part of the College Avenue Associates property, and then College Avenue Associates would be responsible for maintaining that and keeping that kind of stuff from happening back there in the future.
So up until now, has this just not been touched for a long time? Is that?
Right. Yeah, it's all just kind of wooded, overgrown area. I think we did the tree survey on it back before COVID, so 2018, 2019, somewhere about in there. And much of it at that time was dead ash trees. But you can see up along the front there, just to the west of the KFC property, is 3 single-family homes. And then this parcel, the long parcel to the west, is just vacant, undeveloped land. And then there's some other, probably former residential, now kind of commercial properties even west of that. And then to the south is the mobile home court. Can't think of the name of it, but so yeah, this is just kind of forgotten land, I would say, in back there, tucked back in that corner.
So compared with the new UDO and with the old rules, how does it compare as far as what the College Avenue Associates need to do? And
It's being reviewed under the current ordinance, so nothing has changed as of yet. It's probably an example I'll be testing with, and if you're interested in seeing that, I can bring that forward at a future meeting. But for now, the rules are the same.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to see if any of the setback or the buffer itself changes, or
And we did go through an iterative process with this. The original submittal had that new driveway coming off of the Salvation Army property, coming due west, and then taking a 90-degree turn to go up to College, and that clipped the north edge of the wetland itself, in addition to buffer and setback and young woodland. So with working with staff, we came up with this compromise that angles our way off of there and keeps us out of the wetland boundary itself. Still gets into the buffer and the setback, which was unavoidable, but it did keep us out of the wetland. In fact, we have a retaining wall added in there specifically to keep us from having to even grade into that wetland. So there was a real effort made to meet the intent of the ordinance, with still the need for the special exception.
Right.
So the drive is going to go through, the drive is going to go, yeah, can you run the drive with the cursor? Is that it right there?
Yeah, so it extends south through the College Avenue property into the Salvation Army parking lot here. Don't go through their site back north to the KFC property.
Okay. And the Young Woodland is represented where?
So this,
There we go.
the green.
Okay.
The light and dark green, it's all young woodland
So
in there.
That really bright green and the dark green?
And the dark,
Or
that
that
map-
lime color, what is that?
yeah,
That's the
the
wetland buffer.
lime is buffer, wetland buffer.
Okay.
But the two shades of green are the young woodland, and this map does need to be updated because we discussed with Plan Commission and they agreed that lighter green right there would also be acceptable to remove in consideration of cleaning up the wetland and doing the wetland cleanup as a mitigation effort.
So there is anticipated east of this drive, essentially the young woodland would be entirely disturbed at some point, and there's anticipated future development, potentially the three residential lots here could become part of a development or a large development, or just east of this drive could accommodate future development. So it's in anticipation of that, opposed to putting it all within a conservation easement and then having a larger process or more difficult process to come and amend that conservation easement. So the applicant's trying to just take care of that now.
So the drive will remain in the buffer,
A portion of it, yeah.
Correct.
and everything to the east of the drive potentially is on the table for removal and then future development.
Correct. With this approval, the applicant will have the ability to remove trees when they would like to east of the drive.
And I'm just curious, have you talked with the three current homeowners who have trees, I'm assuming, that are lining the border and now it's going to be removed and then they might have something else move in? Irregardless of the fact that it might already be zoned for that, they might, I'm just thinking, you're taking their, are they aware of this or?
I know my client owns one of those properties. I don't know which one, but the other two, I know he's spoken to them. I don't know at what level of detail. They are all zoned business, same as this, so they're all business zoned properties for what that's.
Oh, it's not a residential.
There's
zoning.
still
I
people
thought it was
living,
home.
they are residential, there are people living in them now,
Mhm.
but the properties are zoned business. Was it B2?
B2, correct.
B2, yeah.
Okay.
Do you know the percentage of, I'm going to use the word alive and dead vegetation? Because I know exactly where this is, and I know it's the whole back corner is trash, junk. I know ash trees, emerald ash borer took over, and it's all gone.
Right.
Do you know how much? Not really.
Okay. I don't
That's
have.
all right. I
a-
was just curious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have a percentage. I think the tree survey, it had a quantity listed.
On that.
It listed what was alive and what
Sure.
was dead and what was struggling at
Yeah.
that point in time. But I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Okay.
I apologize.
So I know that corner over there has been struggling for at least as long as I can drive. So.
Ever since the DOT took out the driveways,
Yeah.
that kind of hurt the KFC.
So these are the maps that we were provided the first time you came around. But my understanding is things have changed since the last time we met. Is that right?
The only thing we really changed was the woodland discussion.
The drive location on the plans you have should be the same. The only difference would be this lighter or this solid green color east of the drive that would now be part of the application and disturbance of the young woodland.
Is there any targeting as far as the who to take over? Because I know right now it's want to build it up to make it appealing, but is there like a subsection that you're aiming for to like try and gain as far as your leasee or?
I haven't heard any names at all for the replacement user of the KFC, if that's what you're asking.
I don't mean like the who, but rather like, is it a
what type of
yeah.
user?
Is it just
know.
like, hey, if someone's willing to take this, that'd be awesome. But
I
what I mean?
honestly don't think
we're not targeting anyone.
Not targeting anyone, and I don't think he's gotten to that level of discussion.
Okay.
To be honest,
So this is all just to set the stage for
this is to set the stage, and it was part of the agreement with Salvation Army that this drive had to go in order to do the land swap that they needed, and it got very complicated with green space and all kinds of other things. But when the dust settled, this was kind of the most appropriate way to do it.
From the questionnaire, I may have missed, but the risk wasn't spelled out as if disturbing is what I understand. But are there any, from a planning perspective, are there any downsides? Meaning, this is definitely not a floodplain, but I'm just wondering: is the risk spelled out? Is it going to be the groundwater contamination that we're worried about, or what is it that the disturbance is? I don't know the disturbance.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's necessary risks in that fashion, but I mean, it is a disturbance impact to natural resources. It does permanently reduce that setback and buffer from that wetland. However, the applicant has stated they will have a retaining wall. They're trying to establish, and it's in the condition to establish a setback that was recommended from the Natural Resource Protection Plan based on DNR standards. So the applicant is willing to make that adjustment and at least provide that level of setback from the wetland. So I think it's that consideration and balance
Just
of
the compliance part of it.
Yeah.
And runoff from this new driveway is being captured in storm sewer and routed out to College Avenue. So we're not putting that driveway runoff into the wetland or anything like that.
Is there curb and gutter on the driveway?
Yes.
Personally, I could not see any risk other than, it is disturbed. But, I don't know for others.
I have a question for you, Alderman. For our current UDO then, because obviously things are getting cleared out and maybe cannot be replanted at this site, so this is with the new one, so it'd be 1.5 somewhere else planted in this city, right?
Where is the mitigation area on your plan?
The mitigation was being done in the form of cleaning up the wetland.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So basically in exchange of removing the trees, you're cleaning up the swamp, basically, or wetland area. Okay.
And what does that consist of?
It'll be cleaning up the buckthorn that's in there and clearing that out, clearing the trash out of that area, the dead ash trees. Basically, trying to bring it back to something where it looks alive and not. We weren't talking about any kind of new wetland plantings or anything of that sort, but basically cleanup of what's there and getting it so it doesn't look neglected.
So removal of the buckthorn, removal of the dead trees and or shrubs, and then removal of the trash.
Yes.
And then how does that work? Does somebody then come out and go, yep, this is good?
There is a site inspection process when an applicant comes in for development plans, either as part of a grading plan or afterwards we'll go out and look at the site. Did this already go to Plan Commission?
This did go to Plan Commission, and I would just add the condition does include that the applicant put together a plan for planning staff review. So we would review that, and then once it's completed, we would do an inspection to make sure that the work was done in accordance with that plan.
And conservation easement will be placed over the top of that whole area too.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the College Avenue Associates Natural Resource Special Exception for the proposed impacts and disturbance of the Young Woodland area.
I'm going to second that. So now we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those not in favor? And then motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for
Thanks
moving me up
feedback.
first. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Nice meeting everyone.
Have a good night.
Have a
Bye.
pleasant evening.
Either.
I have a question for mitigation.
Do you have any use for these? Do they have any use for these? Because otherwise it's all recycled. No? It's all just going, okay.
So for mitigation, like for any new developments is so obviously city planning decides that, right, when it's through that planning process.
We make a recommendation based on what's in the ordinances and based on the site conditions.
Sorry, you make a recommendation.
We make a recommendation, but the entire decision actually lies with Common Council
Okay.
as to what the document that they adopt is called the standards, findings, and decision.
Okay.
And that typically includes an attached plan, like the ones that you looked at, that would have some kind of mitigation
Sure.
memo.
Okay.
Sometimes because, in this case, I think it is the case that they've kind of had a lot to work on.
Yeah.
It would be that its mitigation must be provided subject to staff approval is the
Okay.
condition instead
Sure.
of the actual plan having been provided. So it kind of depends who they're working with and what stage of development they're at.
Okay.
So yeah, it varies a little bit, but
Okay.
we make sure that what you see at least comports with the ordinance.
Okay.
So.
Got it. Yeah, it's kind of because I haven't read through that whole thing, so I'm saying
The ordinance?
Yeah.
I think I did a little bit of a training. I think you were here for that, but I'm happy to share
Yeah.
part 4 with you is
Yeah.
probably the big one. And then that is, it describes what is protected, to what extent,
Yeah.
and then
I
what the
think I
requirements
have it in
are.
my room somewhere.
Yeah.
I remember reading it at some point. So.
The inspection, who signs off on it, saying
The planner.
the planner signs off?
Yeah, in some cases, I will take a review by someone from engineering if there's something about the site that I can't measure. If there's folks that'll do
Like a
surveys.
drainage thing or something
Yeah.
like that.
But for example, I'll be going out for a final inspection on a building in the next 2 weeks that also, so it was a residential development. Let me make a note for myself. It was a residential development that, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Residential development on 27th Street that has a pretty significant mitigation area, so I'll be checking to make sure that they put the plants in. I don't have the expertise to identify all of those plants, but I can at least say they put plants where they said they would, and kind of take a look and make sure that the areas of impact don't seem to exceed what they were allowed for. And then if I have doubts, I would have engineering go out there. So.
And so that was my next question. So engineering then has that expertise, or, you know?
They're able to do a survey, so if there was something that I needed the boundary of it marked to compare with an approved plan, that would be something they'd be able to do. But we don't have a wetland delineator on staff or a biologist or anything like that. So
like for like when they're talking about removal of species as part of the mitigation, invasive species. I mean, buckthorn they mention. There's a lot of other invasive species that potentially. I don't know. I haven't been out there, but
in the case of woodlands, we would have the city forester go.
Yeah, and so the forester is not involved with this, even though it's a young woodland.
He hasn't evaluated it. That's something that we require folks to privately contract to do for our purposes.
That whoever they hire.
Well, there are some certifications that are required for wetlands. In the case of the forestry, I have sent people out if I don't buy it.
Sure.
And I'm not even suggesting that somebody would intentionally not do what they're supposed to do. I just think that people sometimes hire somebody, let me hire somebody to take care of this, and they don't have the expertise, and they don't know what different species are, whether they're invasive. They don't know what quality native trees and shrubs are.
Yep.
And so then, the city isn't checking on that, and then they're done, the mitigation's done, and we don't end up with, the citizens don't end up with what we should have ended up with in the deal, because they want the cheapest thing, and that's what business does, right, is they're going to hire the cheapest contractor to go in there and do. So it does bother me a little bit that we don't have somebody to check on some of those species, even if it's just like an invoice of here's the trees that were used, that the forester could review and be like, yes, these are native oak trees, these are okay, or these are,
So we do get a landscaping plan. Usually the mitigation is included in a landscaping plan. Again, with this development, I don't think they're doing a site plan at this time, or I'm not totally sure where it's at, but the landscaping plan would look like a landscaping plan that would be for installation. And then we would be able to say these species, the number of trees, et cetera, match. With wetland delineations, again, we do require either the certification from DNR or an assured delineator, so that, there's a level of confidence there, but that point is well taken and is something that we're trying to incorporate better standards into the new UDO in terms of clarity about species, types of seed mixes that are appropriate. There's that mitigation guide that's being drafted that you guys have given feedback on already. And what was the other thing I wanted to say about that? Oh, and the discussion on this agenda about preferred species of trees. So the question about specimen trees is specifically, are there types of trees that you think merit a higher level of protection, or that would count farther? So the way that the ordinance is drafted, it protects area and also individual trees, but the individual trees have a lesser standard because they're standalone, basically. So the new mitigation standards will have an allowance for if you're preserving individual trees or specimen trees, that counts towards your mitigation, whereas currently that's not something that we're considering, or not something that's in the ordinance. So that is to answer some of that discussion, because I'm aware of the gaps, and you guys have given feedback about that before. So it's been an ongoing issue with how these approvals are reviewed and what the administrative process looks like after, and it's one of the things that we're trying to address. So, but unfortunately, that process has taken a long time to get to the adoption point. So I think it would be constructive. For me, I need to do this, but to go through and kind of show you what's going to be changing under the new standards. So that's something I can work towards. Probably not for your next meeting, but hopefully this year. So.
Okay, I think that's good.
So I have one more question / clarification. So with regard to this specific thing that we just approved, okay?
Mhm.
So the driveway is going to go in. This part of it's going to go all to development, and part of the agreement that was come to is that on this side of the driveway where the wetland is, they're going to remove the invasives, remove the dead material, remove the garbage so that the wetland can be improved.
Mhm.
And I just want to make sure I'm clear. The person that's going to go out there and say, yeah, the wetland's going to be improved is not a wetland delineator, is not someone with any expertise on what an improved wetland looks like or what wetland species look like or anything like that. That's currently what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it would be most likely the city forester if we're looking at the trees. Otherwise, the best we can do is send a planner out there.
And right now you're saying it's going to be a planner. The forester's not going to be the one that's going to even go out there. Is that?
I would,
right?
yeah, I think it would be a conversation with Nick about that. I mean, I'm not reviewing this particular project.
Yeah. So I just think it would be in the city and the citizens' best interest to think about, yes, making sure that whoever's signing off that this was done to the standard that was agreed upon and everything should be someone who has expertise in that area, whether it's a woodland or a savanna or street tree planting or whatever, because when we talk about the next, what is on here about what trees are of value, it largely depends on where are you putting the tree, because that's going to change. Some trees aren't salt tolerant. You don't want to put them in a median area as a mitigation tree, because they're never going to do well when we salt the roads and whatever. Other trees, but take them out of that situation, and we want to make sure that in a large acreage we're using those kind of trees. So it is a discipline, horticulture, arboriculture, wetland, and when we don't have someone with expertise signing off that that's done, that I think we should look at fixing. Because one of the things that I've heard over and over with this particular council is that we had this put in place, but because we didn't pretty much dot our I or cross our T, now this is what we have to accept because, oh, the silt fence is up. It's still up, but we don't have anything to, And so those are the kind of things that if I'm going to continue to sit on this, I want to, I think we need to fix it.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And you can't, it's not a word of mouth. It needs to be written down in the rules and the ordinances. This is not an option, it's a requirement, and these are the consequences when they're not met. That's how you improve a community, not, yeah.
Shrug your shoulders. Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I just think it seems very hard to do that.
Well, I'm not saying it all gets fixed. I just want to work towards that. That's all. And we have an opportunity with the UDO to start thinking about how to do that. And you have a lot of expertise to help us to be like, maybe what we could do is this, that, or the other. I'm not trying to criticize anybody. I'm saying, let's think about ways to do this better.
How to move the ball.
I think that's a little bit of a problem that we have, even just what we just approved tonight, the planner can go out there with the best of intentions and look and be like, hey, it does look better than before, but if they don't have the expertise to know what, a quality or what all the invasive species are, how do they know that it's, you can see garbage. I mean, I'm not saying it's nothing. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say I think JB has addressed some of this. So the woman that has presented before this commission before is a consultant with a background in environmental issues and planning. And we've talked about this exact issue because I am not a wetland delineator, and I'm not going to hedge anything about that. And so there's some suggestions that we've been working through. They're just not top of mind right now. So that's something I can kind of circle back to. The other piece of this is that currently the ordinance does have an option to require bonding for mitigation, but that is at the discretion of Plan Commission, and it has to be tied to a landscape plan. So it's a little bit like fuzzy compared to bonding specifically for the mitigation itself. And then the draft does include language for that to require that there be a financial surety that can be clawed back if something isn't done.
So we currently have that in place with the old UDO. We had that in place.
We currently have provisions in the UDO that require that all landscaping be bonded for, and then that includes mitigation areas. The new UDO will have a bonding requirement specific to mitigation areas.
And have we ever had to, as the city, claw back on mitigation that was not satisfactory? Take some of that bond?
Not during my time here. There's
Never gets exercised.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. It's like,
Who has the oversight? That is the question.
Yeah, and nobody wants to be that person that's like, listen, you have a bond of whatever, $6,000 here for these 10 trees and 5 of them are dead. We're gonna replant them because they're dead or whatever. This is an example. So if it's never been used, I feel 99.9% confident saying that there have been mitigation that have not met what they were supposed to. So that shows me that that's not really something that's functioning.
It's that there's that critique is valid. I can think of a few examples like that. Partly because some of the structure of how things get administered now doesn't include planning being directly involved in the developer's agreement, and that is something that does need to change. So it is something that we need to address, but to not include that provision in the ordinance means that we'd have to enable it later. So in the case of, there have been cases when we have clawed back bonding for landscaping, and I'm trying to think of another example. So like if trees die and they're part of a mitigation area, I can't think of specific examples, but we have pulled through on that.
Berm with Hawthorne.
Probably. Yes, you're thinking of the subdivision berm, yeah.
Yep.
But there's a little bit of an administrative disconnect that you're seeing that's valid. So
They had to, because they were still under warranty, harvested, planted new specimens, and
But they just never did.
they did, but then it was the new ones were not.
Not the same. I gotcha.
So that's where it had to kind
Yeah.
of kick in.
As a commission, can we make a suggestion or a written concern? Because in my opinion, it always comes down to money at the end of the day. Can we make it where we have to have, the developer has to have a licensed, whatever, wetland, whatever word you said, I don't remember what it was.
Delineator.
Yeah, that word. Sorry, I won't be able to say that, so I'm not even going to try.
I don't even
You
know
know.
you need a wetland delineator. I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
you, because the delineator is the one that determines this is a wetland area. This is
Okay,
where the
or at
boundaries
least
of
a
the wetland
biologist
are.
or whatever,
You
you know what I'm
need
saying?
somebody who has a background in horticulture or plant soil science and knows what species belong.
Like, can we do that as a suggestion, saying having,
Some kind of credential.
that's unfortunately not funded by the city, funded by the developer, saying they need to do approval for that?
you can make that recommendation. I mean, if you had I'm trying to think how you would craft a motion.
But that
But that be either to update the current ordinance or to include that in the new ordinance to make that recommendation. So if you wanted to update the current ordinance, we would have to go through the process for that. But if it's feedback to be incorporated into the new ordinance, you could either send it to me individually and I can just pass it along, or if you wanted it as a commission to adopt a motion making the recommendation, that would have a little bit more force to it.
Yeah.
Yep. And that would be something that I would include as we're working through the approvals process for this ordinance, so that folks know that you guys, I mean, your feedback is being incorporated as we go along, but if that's something you feel strongly about and want to kind of drive the nail home on, that is within your purview. So.
But I would caution that we would.
I was going to turn to you for your advice.
Hold
Yeah.
any further discussion on this until it's been properly noticed on an agenda, so that way it's not anything where it can be viewed as a violation of open meeting law. So.
Yeah, I mean, you have the UDO update on your agenda this evening, but if you want to take up a specific motion, I agree with that advice, so we could put it on the next agenda.
I would say like.
Leave a paper trail, I guess.
Yeah. Where if anyone wanted to speak on it, they can see the agenda, see that we're going to discuss it, and then they can come in and say, here are my thoughts on this, so that way it's not something where someone says, well, hang on a second, no one ever, this was never brought up in the light of
So
day.
we could talk about it,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
it just goes to garbage. because-
Exactly.
okay, I got you. Yeah. No, I
I have had that.
That's why I like. That's why I like having you on the board, especially with me. I'm like, this is all new to me, so it's that's the only way you can learn is from others.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely.
Okay, so let me just write this down before we go.
After next month's agenda, maybe.
Yeah. And I can write this down.
We can talk about that too, because the other thing that I'm thinking is, in lieu of requiring a person with a specific set of credentials, we could also, which is kind of part of the topic on the unfinished business, have an approved list of species for wetland areas. And it could be as simple as X amount of one of these 5 high dollar or high value species per half acre, X amount of these per half acre, and X amount of, so that they could pick different and then say something like proof or invoiced proof of this species identification or from approved native plant nursery is required. Then they can hire somebody to do it, or they can look and do it. You open up, because the idea is not
To be super restrictive, but allow for and maybe a number might not be the right way of going about it. I would probably, if anything, say percentage. Because if you have a half acre, you need 3 of one species from column A. You have a number of those. You need 3 species. A quantity of 3, then it becomes very minute. Versus you need 8% or 10%. I think would be much more of a much more driver as far as like we want to preserve the wetlands, and the best way of doing it is with those native species with a diversity of in the ecosystem without it just being like, well, I got 3 here, 5 here, 5 here, I'm good.
right.
I want to see 10%, 10%, 20%, and maybe as a whole it doesn't create a plurality, but rather that there is a strong, position in that ecosystem of we have good native plants here that are going to be very strong, hardy, that are going to survive, and not just, okay, well, I planted these 3, they're going to die, and because I just passed inspection, that's all there is to it. I'd rather see it being that percentage of where ones that, to your point, that's saying we know that these will thrive, these will grow, these will produce and reproduce, and that will be great for this area as far as.
I can't imagine no other city that some other city has to have something like this. This is not a new idea that we could perhaps ask the.
Yeah, JB has a group of case studies and comparables that
Yeah.
she kind of pulls
There was
from.
some kind of framework for
Yep.
that we could look at for Southeast Wisconsin.
She refers to Brookfield quite often. Apparently, they have for stormwater and mitigation like a pretty comprehensive ordinance. I haven't reviewed it personally, but she has a group of cases that she likes to work from. So
Yeah. Just, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I'm sure it's probably
Yeah.
somewhere.
yeah, some of this work is like being done now by the consultants. And so one of the things that I think will be constructive, and we're planning on doing this when it's ready, is bringing that mitigation guide back to the commission for further input and review. So the tree item was like, she doesn't have to be here this evening, but she did want to hear what you think. And then if you have this kind of ongoing feedback or want to see where a draft is at, I can share that as well. So
Okay.
yeah, Brookfield is one of the comparables that comes up quite often. So typically, when we would approach something like this, and she's got a long history of this work,
Yeah.
like I would be like, here are the comparable cases, and has it worked and has it not? And that ordinance also apparently is working well. So that's good news.
And even Cedarburg and McQuan seem to
Sure.
be a better one.
Places with all the money.
All right, Jesse, let's move along.
Yes. So unfinished business review articles for the City of Franklin newsletter. I don't think we've had one lately, correct?
No.
Can we do one for fall stuff? And who is responsible for writing that, I guess, first?
So you guys have, in the past, commissioners have either provided materials that they have worked with and think would be useful to link to.
Yep.
Root Pike Win has written brief articles for the newsletter at your request as part of their partnership with the city for the watershed.
Okay.
And then there was a little bit of an attempt to get youth to write
Okay.
articles, but
Um,
it's on you guys to
So I
put
wanna
forward
make this
material.
quick. How
Yeah.
fast do they need? Like 30-day? How fast do they need it? When do they print it?
I will have to look back again at
Okay.
the. It's a quarterly newsletter.
Okay.
The deadline for fall has passed,
Okay.
so we would be looking at the winter
Okay,
newsletter.
then,
So-
that's fine. So if anybody wants to bring something in for the winter edition,
Mm-hmm.
to bring that next meeting.
Yeah, so it's usually something that's, I don't know how many words it is, but it's like half a page
Okay,
or
sounds
less.
good.
So
So I just have one thought on this. The recent newsletter that came out, did you guys see how there was the insert with the Franklin parks? That was like something new that was actually useful that I thought was, I don't know if.
that's a little blue little book we get, right? That's what you're talking
That's
about.
what she's
Okay,
talking
yeah.
about. Yeah. And we've always done, well, since I've been here, we've always done kind of the same thing over and over and over again. And a lot of it's buckthorn. And I don't know. I was just thinking if there was a way to like piggyback off of that without doing another insert, but talk a little bit about within that, I don't know. It would have been nice to coordinate with them of here's your parks. Within the parks, these are the manicured landscaped areas, and these are the natural areas. But that would have taken
So
more energy than anybody gave.
yeah, well, and Parks Commission, that map was drawn by one of the commissioners who's a volunteer. She also obtained the funding for the full color printing for that from Tourism Commission. So the commission went and did the legwork to do that.
Wow.
Because at present, there's really very little budget directly allocated to either commission in terms of their publications or other work that they're doing. The point is well taken, but just bear in mind that there's not specific funding for it. So if it's something that's going in the newsletter, it would have to be single color unless there's either an allocation by Common Council or in this case the Tourism Commission felt it would be an appropriate collaboration and use of their funds.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Understand.
yeah. But the other thing is if
It was
there's
worth the money, I think. It was nice. Did you guys see
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Parks Commission is also very open to kind of hearing these suggestions, and if there's things that you'd like to say, like it would be cool to have like a nature guide for Franklin Woods or something like that. That would be that's something that I actually am hoping to incorporate into future park design is educational materials about, what's in the park. The one that we're most likely to develop soon has a pretty large wetland that's going to go through a restoration process, and so
Yeah.
So maybe as a goal, as a commission, maybe we should, when that time approaches, to kind of think about something we can do. At least I think we should do it on our own, because I'd like to.
Long-term goal.
Yeah, I think so. Just definitely, as this commission, I feel like sometimes gets on the back burner a lot. Is kind of what I've noticed. So whatever impact we can make as the four of us,
I think that parks, the guide for nature and things of that nature, I think would be great, and I think to have that be part of the spring, where
Yeah, the winter's a little tough.
well, I think the winter gives us opportunity to kind of really think about what would be the most impactful,
Yeah.
what would be something that would give value for residents,
Yep.
and so that way it's not you need to come up with something in like 3 weeks.
Yep.
That we have the entire winter, and then when the spring edition of the newsletter comes out,
Yep.
then it's hey, this is really
Useful.
something that
Yeah.
you can do, whether, and maybe it might even be a thing of, kind of tie in, because I know on Arbor Day, we get the Girl Scouts, we get the Boy Scouts that do a lot of with the cleanup efforts, and being able to maybe even coordinate with local troops of hey guys, what would be something that there could be value from at the very least from a scouting aspect of here's something for you guys to do to learn more about nature, about conservatory, all that really great stuff that I think that everyone here kind of has that same sort of mindset for it, and being able to say, we have an activity this weekend now. Hey,
Yeah.
gang, here's what Troop 599 is going to be doing, and we're going to be doing this things, and we're kind of looking at what we kind of put out there as either learning environments or any sort of modules for, civic service through cleanup or something of that nature,
Yeah.
where it's not just, buckthorn's really bad and you should get rid of it.
Yeah.
That there
Yeah.
becomes a little bit more diversified as far as what we kind of communicate to the city as a whole. I think having the winter gives us opportunity to kind of really have something dynamic, or kind of pre-plan of, this is what we think would be great for the spring. This would be something really strong for the summer, and being able to have that for, beyond just awesome spring section. What are we doing for summer?
Yep.
I don't know. You know what I mean?
So how does that work legally for us to be able to collaborate about this kind of thing and not be having we can meet outside of this meeting and discuss these things, or
if you're working on planning an event, so if you're taking a decision about something that affects the city directly, that needs to be part of a notice meeting. But if you're executing, we're going to have an event, we've decided we're going to contact X number of speakers, those kinds of things.
or even just we want to put together some articles, because it seems to me like part of the problem is that we meet once a month and that we don't talk to each other in between, and we can't email with more than one person. So then it's either one person individually is going to have to come up with these kinds of things and send it to Marion to send through to everybody else. And it's a cumbersome way if we want to have something meaningful. And I don't know what everybody else's schedule is, but to me it would be let's go to a coffee shop and talk about what article, what we want to work on, give each other or take up parts of the assignments, and then move this forward, because
We could say it. And
we're not.
then
Otherwise, we're going to
yeah.
sit here for 3 hours in
Yep.
this meeting.
Yeah, and there are the most important thing here is that you cannot take a decision as a group without that noticing process.
Uh-huh.
So there are concerns about what's called walking quorum, where you have discussion that affects the outcome of something in the meeting. So it's your responsibility to be mindful of that. And I'm not going to police the coffee shops, but
So the key there are three keys when it comes to walking quorum.
Yep.
Numbers. Okay, there needs to be a majority of the committee having the discussion at the same time. 2, coming to a decision. Like, hey, we're gonna outlaw buckthorn in the city, and we're gonna do that. Are we good? We good? If we do that at the target, that's a walking quorum. So it's very much like, can we talk about like how my kid is taking fencing? Sure, because that's not discussing committee business. But if we're talking about, hey, we need to do something about X, and this is what we're going to do about it, that satisfies those three things: numbers, talking about pertinent information, and coming to a decision. So as long as we don't do that, we should be good.
Because, like, for this, for example, we'd have to bring it, present it, vote on it, then we're good.
Correct.
That's what would make it good.
That would make it open, transparent, and legal.
Okay, yeah.
And I will also note that this commission has had subcommittees to work on projects that have allowed the city to create an agenda and do the noticing process, et cetera. But right now, given some of the stuff that's happening in my department, I actually today was instructed not to take on something like that without talking to my manager first. So, because there is a process that has to be followed to notice a meeting, and some of that is staff time and just making sure that the record is being preserved and those kinds of things. So, thank you for your clarification. And I think, please just use your judgment. So,
and just for the sake of clarification, that if for some reason we're at Jesse's birthday party and we just fall into discussion and we do that and it's super duper bad and it's not something that's encouraged, you're not going to go to like environmental commission jail. It'll be a civil fine up to from $50 to $200 is the max, is just the fines. There's no jail time that's involved. It's just hey, you shouldn't do that. Give me $50, and that's all there is to it. So just
I didn't even know that was a thing, but
yeah. Well, it's to prevent people from making decisions outside of the
and
public.
it's all for the sake of the court system in Wisconsin has been very, very clear that they will always side on the side of providing transparency and openness for the general public. So it isn't oh wow, you guys just have this crazy agenda and you're just doing your own thing and no one's held accountable.
Yep.
That is what the court system is very much against, and they will rule very much against anything that would even have any true where you're trying to obfuscate anything. They will be very much of we see what this is, regardless of your intent. What you did is something that isn't allowed by open meetings law, and thus the civil forfeiture as far as where that goes.
But can you talk about what to bring to the agenda, though?
With the chair.
With the chair.
Yeah, or with me, but I'm not on the commission.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you can talk to. You can call Marion any time of the day. Literally.
Please don't do that.
Kidding. But since Marion's not on the commission, she would not be part of that whole the numbers part of
and
one of those
I
three
can
things.
share things with you too. So if you're I want everyone to read this article, I can forward it out to the group. Gail could do that for you too. Just be mindful that we might not see it right away if it's time sensitive. But so what we typically give direction is that if there's something you want the whole group to see, that it should come to staff, and then either I can disseminate it right away or put it in a future packet. So, and the packet gets, I don't know if this packet still still gets published on the website, but packets
It
are
does.
part of the public record. And so that becomes publicly available as well. So it's a transparency thing. But my email is also subject to
Open meeting.
open, yeah.
Open records request.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
So am I.
Well, and all of that is a really good discussion about just kind of the administrative rules as well and procedures. So it was in your previous packet so that you would get a paper copy of it, but you guys should all have received a paper copy of administrative rules for the commission, which mirrors pretty closely what's in the ordinances in terms of what's enabled for the commission, what your duties and responsibilities are, et cetera. So I'm not going to get too in-depth on that, but if you have questions about it, did I make a slide for this? No. Did I?
Or are we moving to?
I did make a slide for this. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to take the moment to transition. So your administrative procedures are a part of the municipal code, which is 10-14. There's supposed to be 7 members, one of which is an alderperson, and then just the scope of what you're allowed to discuss and consider and make recommendations on is part of that ordinance. So recommended policies and procedures about recycling, composting, and other sort of waste management policies. There is a separate landfill commission and another commission that works on those kinds of waste issues as well, but from an environmental perspective, that is part of your purview. Environmental issues, just broadly, monitoring federal and state laws and policies regarding environmental issues as they relate to the city. So if there's something that you think the city should be evaluating in terms of how we're applying local law, that's worth noting. I am part of my role as a planner is to stay on top of how planning law is affecting the local ordinances, and it's particularly in the area of wetlands and other natural resources. That's fluid in terms of judicial cases and that kind of thing, but it is something that if you guys hear about something that's through your expertise, it's always really helpful to make me aware of it or to make the city aware of it. To promote interest in obtaining grants. So as an example, a previous commissioner brought forward information about a pool of grants through the local sewerage district that's been used to do a few projects in the city. And then there's been other opportunities. So if you become aware of something and want to implement it locally, that's something that is entirely within your purview. And then you can also review and recommend matters as directed by the Common Council. So, for example, this commission was asked to make a recommendation about no mow May and did a process of research. The commissioners reviewed articles together and arrived at a recommendation. So, and then Robert's Rules is how you run the meetings. If you have other questions, let me know. The open meetings thing is kind of the stickiest wicket a lot of the time. So thank you for that discussion.
I just enter you just presented this.
Yes.
Okay. There's no motion, right?
No, it's just informational.
All right. So article's done. Review of administrative duties. Do we have any updates on the UDO?
Yep. So that process is continuing forward. I did have a question on here about high value and specimen trees. So the consultant had a question about what kinds of trees, if there are specific size or age of trees that you thought would be worth preserving over and above adding an extra layer of protection into the ordinances for or crediting for over and above in mitigation standards. What are some high value species either to protect or replant? And then also if there's like a particular ratio that you'd want to consider. And I apologize, but I need to take a restroom break. So
Absolutely.
Sure.
I will be right back. You can talk amongst yourselves, but then I will need to.
But is that something we would direct towards the city forester then?
I mean, I would think so.
Yeah.
Because you may have Commissioner Serafin, but I don't have the expertise on.
I don't either.
Well, and text of, so the size or age of a tree to preserve or protect is very site specific.
Yeah, well, I think maybe regardless, at least for me, if it's older than X amount of years, I think we should try to do everything we can to save it if we can, to an extent. I mean, I don't understand. I don't know anything about the studio stuff, but you know what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
you know, I'd hate to see a 200-year-old old tree go down.
The
to
two
put
of
up a
them were just
Wendy's.
taken down
Yeah.
across the street from me.
Yeah.
No, I think that's what
But-
the consultant is asking.
Asking
If we say,
us?
is there a threshold? And
Yeah.
So what she's saying is, if there's 5 acres that a developer's going to put 10 homes on,
Yeah.
and they're going to take out trees to do it, and there's some wetland area or something,
Yeah.
in lieu of mitigation, if we ask them, protect this oak tree and this oak tree, and then you won't have to. But it's so site specific. So I don't think, which is what my point is, like you can't, it's very difficult to make an overarching
Yeah.
rule about any tree, if a tree's over this many years old, or if it's this.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's hard because if we were the size of Raymond, for example,
Sure.
the city of Franklin is much more vast as far as square footage goes.
Yeah.
And what something in the upper west corner is not going to be the same as
Yeah.
the southeast corner of the city, and it's
Different. Yeah.
and I think it's really hard to very much agree with you, is that it's very hard to put, okay, here's our standard. Well,
I kind of think it's
Ever-
almost like, to me, what we should say is something like, that is an option. Protecting higher value trees is an option, and depending on your site, if you have a site with a lot of trees, like we would welcome the opportunity to like have the forester go out there and be like, the other thing I'm thinking is, like, when you think about mitigation, a lot of times a developer develops this piece and then they own this piece, but they also have that piece. So, like, if you drive down 36 right now, and on the left-hand side, before you get to the Irish Cottage, if you're doing that anytime soon, look to the left before you get to that stoplight before Ryan Road. There's a beautiful chunk of property that has a bunch of really old growth oak on it. It used to have, it looked like it had a hotel and another building. They've removed the buildings and it's for sale.
Yeah.
Whoever develops that property,
It's gonna have
it's a
fun.
higher up on a hill, so I don't think there'll be like a wetland mitigation or anything. But I look at those trees and I think, oh my God, I hope that we could ask them to save all those old trees no matter who buys it, instead of, plowing them over and putting a quick trip in, which is what happens a lot. But so you want to, to me, what we should figure out is, how do you get to say, like, where you could even have that conversation with the developer. Okay, you're developing this and you're developing that over there. This has a wetland. If you protect these over here, we would let you infringe on the buffer or do this or do that because this is more important to. So it's a conversation that's so site specific.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you.
yeah, it's really hard to place
Number.
who did decide
a
what is
standard
a high value?
because a
The
developer.
size and age
Yeah,
of
yeah,
a tree
yeah.
would be considered. Yeah.
I mean,
So
what
what
is
you-
a high value? I guess is it in terms of dollars or is it?
And that I mean, like, I think it's very
Well, like
much
a lot
site.
of old growth oak trees and stuff, those are very high value trees because
The amount of time that
the amount of time that it took for them to grow. They usually provide shade and habitat for a lot of different animal and insect species.
So it's qualitative, not quantitative.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's where we're being asked to put a quantitative thing together for something that is very much That's what I'm trying to say. I guess it'd be nice if we could ask her if the discussion has been, we're thinking like it's so site specific, and we think that having the option to discuss exchanges for mitigation is something that is important, and one of the exchanges would be preserving trees that are considered valuable, or protecting or replanting species that we would consider more valuable than whatever they're infringing upon that requires the mitigation. So is there some examples that she's aware of, maybe in Brookfield or somewhere else, of how you have that written in the ordinance without having kind of like these positive lists of this size oak and this size, you know?
The mitigation guide already is kind of thinking in that way a little bit, so it's designed to offer a menu of if you're going to do this impact, here's a list of things you can do. Currently, it's very prescriptive in terms of an amount of mitigation. It has to be 1.5 to 1, depending on the resource. But then it doesn't specify anything. In some cases, not even that it's a native species, which is...
I have a question. Do we have the power, like, so you know people come to do, what's it, NRSC or whatever? As a commission, do we have a power to see those mitigation? Like, instead of putting quantitative data in front of us, saying we're doing this, this, and this, can a developer present it? This is what's here. This is what we're doing, and we as a commission get to approve that, or is that out of our bounds?
No, it's directly in it.
They provide an example of.
They do the mitigation process, not just.
Yep.
I want to do this.
I mean, may not be on this. I've seen cases for the development where they have proposed the mitigation area. What type of trees.
So that's
They show an
common. I just
architect-
haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an
Got it. Or
architectural
that's
drawing
procedure.
that
I
shows.
just haven't seen it yet.
But even there, I guess the enforcement becomes, because there was one case I remember, they said they will maintain it for 3 years, and after that they're not responsible or something like that. And so,
But the bonding was for 3 years, and then there's not really the mitigation area. So mitigation areas currently and in future will be protected by whatever conservation easement is placed on the property. So if someone requests a natural resource special exception, there is always going to be that requirement that the impacted resources, what remains of them, and any mitigation areas are included in a conservation easement that is then accepted by the city for permanent protection. Whether you see a separate mitigation plan or it is part of either the natural resource protection plan, the drawing that we looked at this evening, or a landscape plan, currently varies a lot. Part of this is going to be clarifying like where the information can be shown. My preference is for on a natural resource protection plan, because as that makes it easier for me to communicate with other departments about where everything is supposed to be. But that's a good point.
Require this to come in front of us?
No. They only come
if they're changing something.
only if they need a variance. Only if they're doing something that is allowed, but with permission by Common Council within certain standards.
So if they operate within the UDO, we don't see it.
Oh, okay.
We're redoing the UDO.
Yep.
And so this is why it's so important that these kinds of things are thought about right now.
Right now.
Because these are the
Okay.
rules of engagement. When you make an exception to the rule of engagement, then you got to come
Got
to
it.
us.
I understand
But
now.
you
So
want everybody to continue on without having to come to us because
Yeah.
they're just following the rules.
So as
Yep.
as the planning commission, they'll like, let's say I buy whatever and want to put a quick trip there or whatever.
Put a what?
Whatever. If I buy a piece of
whatever.
land and want to do
Yeah.
something, they come to you and say, I have this. This is what we're doing, and then as long as it falls in UDO, then you guys pass it.
Yep, if they're meeting the
Theoretically.
standards.
Okay, got it.
then
Okay.
It
So
goes
there's
through
no
whatever
point
the
for us to
review
see it
process
because
is.
we wrote it, I guess, or suggested things or whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, it's your recommendations for this mitigation guide for the natural resource protection
Okay.
standards are being actively incorporated into
I
the
get it.
draft.
Sorry. I just don't understand how all this works yet. So.
I know that's fine. You're
Yeah.
asking the right questions,
Yeah, okay.
and that's better than anything else. So yeah. So do you?
Where is this going in the UDO?
It's going to be in the new. So there's two pieces to this. The new Chapter 7 will be the natural resource protection standards.
Is that in here?
Um,
7?
there might be a draft. I don't have that on me. There should be, if not a draft, then some notation about it because it came later. And then there will be a separate mitigation guide that is subject to change based on the recommendations of this commission. So it won't be written into the text of the ordinance so that it does not require Common Council approval to amend, but it would be part of your purview then as the Environmental Commission to shape some of those guidelines. So, like on an ongoing basis. So.
Is the city forester involved in this? Okay.
Yep, we've had conversations with the natural resource protection chapter, so that is the chapter that I'm most involved in. Although I've had involvement in the entire redraft. We have had conversations with the DNR, with the city forester, with developers, with you guys, with members of the community. There is a task force that you're part of. And separately from that, there is the citizen input group that I think Commissioner Seraphim has encountered, who are residents of the community, one of whom was very much involved in the original drafting of those natural resource protection standards that are in the current ordinance. So we've tried to incorporate feedback from a lot of different resources.
I mean, on this very specific.
Oh yeah, yes. So we did specifically ask him. I also wanted to bring it to you and just ping your expertise. So
he may be developing that list, or is he?
So you guys have previously reviewed a preferred tree list. You guys being this commission have previously reviewed and made a recommendation on a preferred tree list. He operates from a list that he develops with his expertise as the forester, and that has occasionally come before this commission. That specifically pertains to city street trees and trees used in parks. So this would be more general in the sense that it would also include other types of parcels and situations. So.
So if we were to say something, we could always say, if we come up with the list, we can always say, in addition to the trees recommended by the city forester.
Absolutely. Yep.
It would be my preference to not have a positive list, but to incorporate by reference. And I don't know where we should, what organization we should incorporate by reference. That would be something I actually would like to ask both the city forester and for you to ask Marion, the consultant, if there is I know that University Extension will publish lists of Southeast Wisconsin native recommended tree plantings. And that's based off of science that changes over time as we learn more things, so that it's a dynamic list rather than trying to incorporate a list into a UDO and then we find out that, yeah, exactly.
I was thinking, UW Stevens Point or UW-Madison may have these strong professors with strong background on this. Would the commission be able to reach out to them?
Where is our county extension office? We have to have one in Milwaukee County. It's probably in downtown, isn't it? Oh gosh, yeah, I know where it's at. It's in that really old building.
I mean, UW Extension does not exist in the same way that it has traditionally, like it's changed a lot and been reorganized within the structure of the UW system. So they are still doing some of those educational, like 4-H things, but
Well, but
yeah.
extension is through all land-grant universities, so it's not just a state-by-state thing. That's why it's such a great resource, too, because it relies on the land-grant university in each state, which here is UW. But all of the information that the county agents, the county extension offices disseminate is approved through the university. So it's science-backed, and when you work for them, you can't just say, oh, I read this article, this journal, and I thought it all has to be vetted through the land-grant university's background of, PhD scientists and
Yeah.
journal. So it's just usually like, and they do, I mean, you guys have heard of like the Master Gardeners and, they do the Master Gardener program, but they do a lot of stuff just like what we're talking about here. I don't know the current state of extension, but I would be surprised if they're not providing any kind of like landscape plantings and native plant recommendations.
I know they are. I promise you they are.
They have to be,
Yeah, I've looked
and
at
they
it. I know
usually
they
put
have.
out things on Emerald Ash Borer and how to control Japanese beetles and how to stuff like that too.
Yeah, there's this School of Horticulture as a reference that at UW Madison that I refer to their materials a lot just in my own work.
So what was the main question she wanted us to answer today?
If you have any preference for particular trees to protect or to prioritize in terms of protection or mitigation, so how
Okay,
is
so basically we have to.
not removing or to replant.
Okay,
So-
we have to figure out what's so decisive, what is considered what we want to keep and what we don't, right?
You can make you can make a recommendation. I do think there's a lot of value to Commissioner Sarafen's
So
suggestion.
reference something else
But
which knows more than us four do.
But if, for example, you're like, but I also think that oak trees are super important to Franklin XYZ way. So it's this size or age of tree would be not allowed to be removed without an NRSE or something like that. So
Well, is there an easier way to determine the age? I mean, what if they say, oh, I didn't know this was.
You just,
Yeah,
I think our
there's-
recommendation would be X amount of diameter at breast height or above, at this diameter at breast
There's
height
a way to
or
do it
above.
without cutting it down.
You can't,
I
you
wish-
can't remove this without special exception. So I do think that there is value in that. What size is that? I don't know. Anything
Yeah.
that's bigger than this. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
what I can't.
Yeah, it's
So no matter what you're talking about, I do like that. Where if we could come up with if it's this big or bigger, it should be looked at before you can just remove it.
No matter what.
No matter what species. And it might be that somebody goes, oh, it's an elm, it's on its way out, get rid of it.
yeah.
Um,
Do we need to come up with that right now?
no. If you want more information, I can see what I can bring back to the next meeting
Yeah.
from JB.
I like actually the reason I ask is because when I went to Ben Franklin Elementary School, we worked hand in hand with the Ware Nature Center. I remember her first name it was Miss Bev, but she's a tree expert. So everything you guys have been saying, I learned in 6th grade. All gone, of course, but I'd love to talk to her so I can bring it back here and say.
You could invite her to the meeting if she wants to come, or
Okay.
if you have
Yeah.
information that you want to share, that would be.
Yeah, I remember.
So put this on the next agenda then?
Yes.
Yep.
Do I have to do it as a motion or?
No, I can.
Or-
I mean, you can table it,
Okay.
mhm.
Yeah.
so you need a motion to table.
Is
But
that what
then,
you guys are cool
yeah.
with?
I'm fine with that.
Try to
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
our research, try to bring
Mhm.
someone here that has some more expertise in that, and then move forward.
Mhm.
So I motion to table this until the next meeting.
Second. Aye.
All not in favor? Motion carries then. Let me know when you're ready to forward.
Discussion table for next.
I would like to make a friendly suggestion. Is there anything, so we have a lot of new business, is there anything that we must tackle tonight, or can we move all of this to another meeting?
That is completely fine.
You already did item A.
Mhm.
This item B was your request for inclusion on the agenda, so
Mine,
yes.
okay.
The FEMA item, this is just an informational item. I was going to walk you through the newly adopted floodplain ordinance, and I'm happy to wait. It's been adopted. If you have questions about it, I can also refer you to the Common Council minutes from I'll have to send an email, but Common Council meeting that there is a recording on YouTube of it, and it's essentially the same presentation I was going to do tonight this was going to be a little bit more brief. And then the littering item, which is the chair's item, so.
That can wait.
Yep.
Do I have the motion?
Well, and my item B, I think we've dealt with. Not at this meeting.
We've talked about it to some extent, and it's like something that we're talking about including in the new UDO. But if you want to have a bigger discussion about it, because I think this arose from a different natural resource special exception where there was a lot of
golf
discussion,
one, right?
about the boundary markers.
Unfortunately, I know nothing about that, so it's kind of your call on that one.
I mean, I'm happy to table it if
Okay,
we
that's-
want to table it and
That's
have a
fine with
larger
me.
discussion.
Yeah, because I'd have to
We
update myself
amended,
on
the
that.
reason I say was that I amended the letter with regard to a little, oh, wait,
You made an alteration to one of the recommended conditions.
to two things I made an alteration to. One was the seed mix,
Yep.
was more
To a prairie
specific.
grass, yeah.
And two was to make sure that in addition to you're required to put up a silt fence, you're also required to remove the entire silt fence. So this is actually not what I was thinking of. This was talking about using rocks or trees or whatever for
Fence,
boundary
yep.
marking, and that I would like us to think about being more specific about what we're going to ask for conservation boundary area markings.
What's current? Like,
Currently, it is not required by the ordinance, but this commission has consistently recommended that.
okay, so there's no boundary markers at all.
Correct.
So when someone develops, they might push into something, is what you're saying.
Yeah, or mow into an area.
Well,
they're not
yes, they
supposed
might,
to,
but
yeah.
my thing is after the development's done
There's still
and
no
the property's
segregation.
sold, the next person might go, oh, I'm gonna mow all of these tall grasses down and
But it's a
start
prairie.
clearing this, or I'm gonna let
Oh,
my
okay.
horses or goats go back here and graze on this area because they don't understand that this is part of the conservation.
I
Commission
gotcha.
boundary.
Yeah.
So we have always made recommendations to put boulders or fencing or some kind of marker there. And instead of always making a recommendation to do this, I think we should think about
Making it law.
what would make sense to say. In addition, there has to be some kind of more permanent boundary so people know that they're not supposed to be doing that.
Got it.
But I mean, I'm happy to table that
All right,
for everybody to
so-
think on until next time too.
So definitely,
Yeah.
as a commission, look to maybe see what other cities are doing for that specific thing, and then we'll discuss it next time. So I have to motion to table any remaining new business. Then
And then that
Ah.
motion, and then a motion to adjourn. So.
okay. So I'm gonna motion to table all new business that hasn't been already discussed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. And then our mission, or
I make a
Our
motion to
meeting is-
adjourn the meeting.
Okay, go ahead. I second that. Motion to adjourn meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries.
You can-
Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.